I'm thrilled that we're now going to be traveling to Hadar, where Lucy was found. And if you look at the history of paleoanthropology, Lucy is probably the single best known fossil of a human ancestor that's ever been found. And she was found in Ethiopia at a place known as Hadar, H-A-D-A-R, which is a local place name, an Afar word for that locality. And as you look at this map, you can see how the Great Rift Valley continues right on up into Ethiopia and expands into this triangular area known as the Afar Triangle. And this area was first explored by a French geologist who was out mapping the geological strata and so on, and encountered fossil-rich areas that he reported to me and to other colleagues back in Paris. So here's a wonderfully detailed map of, or aerial photograph, a satellite photograph of the Horn of Africa. You see the Red Sea in the north, the Gulf of Aden off to the right, and Lake Turkana down at the bottom. And a very clear picture of the Afar. It's quite a different color, as you can see, that this area, which is known as the Afar, is very dry looking, and it is. This is about 400 feet above sea level. It is a desert. It's where that part of the Great Rift Valley drops down because of subsidence. And the Kenyan border is roughly in here. This is, of course, over here on the right. That's Somalia. And what we're looking at is the Horn of Africa. And, of course, over in here, roughly, we see Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia. So Maurice Tayeb, as I said, was a French geologist, is a French geologist. He's retired now from the French CNRS, the National Center for Scientific Research, and lives in Marseille, France. As a young explorer, as a young geologist, he wandered into what was really literally terra incognita. It was unknown, it was unmapped, there were really no paved roads at that time, and he struck out to work on a generalized geological appreciation of the Afar region. A very hostile, very hot, very difficult to get to, and was a very unstable area when he first started working there. I met him in Paris in the early 1970s. He was very excited, showed me photographs of these fossils he had found, and I had been working previously in southern Ethiopia, and he said, "What do you think of these?" And I said, "These look like very ancient fossils," because from a biostratigraphic point of view, the pigs he was showing me, the elephant specimens he was showing me, looked like they were very old, older than 3 million years. And lo and behold, Maurice asked me to join him in an expedition along with another French colleague and an American to do a preliminary survey in this region. I was just finishing graduate school at the time, and in May of 1972, we set out on an exploratory expedition and encountered incredible landscapes like this. This is the site of Hadar itself. And this is a paleoanthropologist's dream come true. You can see these ancient lake layers that have been systematically laid down. And there are some layers in there that are light colored or white. Those are volcanic ashes, and we know how important they are for determining the ages of these. We camped up on the cliff when we first arrived there late in the evening, and the next day when we drove down, we saw that the ground was littered with fossils like I've shown you earlier, and decided that this is where we should plant our flag. And we approached the Ethiopian government, the Ministry of Culture, and received a permit to work in this area. And you've seen this photo before, but you see the Awash River coursing through, which was a permanent source of water for us. This little white dot right there in the middle of that circle is our camp. So this is taken from a light aircraft as we're flying over. And as far as you can see in the distance, we have geological deposits. And this is a place which is best known as Hadar, as Hadar. And in 1973, we launched our first major expedition to this site and almost immediately began to find remains of human ancestors. The first human ancestor fossil, the first hominin ever found in the Afar region, I found in October of 1973. And unbelievably, it turned out to be a diagnostic fossil. It gave us a lot of information. And it's the one in the middle we see here. It is a partial knee joint. We're missing the kneecap, we never found that, but we have the bottom end of the femur, or the bottom end of the thigh bone here, and the top end of a shin bone or tibia. And they fit together perfectly. And remember how diagnostic that region is? And you can see that the shaft of that femur rose at an angle to the horizontal. So it was very much like the human and very different from the chimpanzee, which rises at a right angle. So immediately we knew that this was from an ancestor that was a hominin that walked upright, and we knew it was older than 3 million years. We now know it was 3.4 million years old, and it constituted at that time the oldest evidence for upright human walking. We know from previous presentations that it goes back now to about 6 million years ago. Looking at the lateral condyle at the outside of the knee joint, you can see that in a chimpanzee it's rounded. We can see that it's very elongated from front to back and flattened in our distal femur or bottom end of the thigh bone. And that's exactly the same anatomy that we see in the Hadar specimen that's 3.4 million years old. So two very important aspects to this particular fossil that show undoubtedly that it was a knee that functioned biomechanically in the same way as our knees do, so it was definitely an upright walking creature, therefore an early hominin. We didn't know who it was, we didn't know what species it belonged to. At that time in the history of paleoanthropology, long before we knew anything about Ardipithecus or Auroran or Sahelanthropus, we thought it was Australopithecus of some kind, and that was our working model, that this belonged in that genus, Australopithecus, but probably maybe the same thing that had been found in South Africa, or maybe it was a new species, we didn't know. Well, today, in 2015, we have more than 400 specimens from the site of Hadar. The Hadar sample constitutes one of the largest and one of the most important and most comprehensive samples of an early hominin known from anywhere in the world. We have lots of jaws and teeth. We have bones from almost every part of the body, as you will see, and it constitutes probably the single most important collection of an early hominin species, which we now call, as a little forecast, Australopithecus afarensis, and you will get used to that term. One of the most important things that we talked about and spent some time talking about that was the geology. We want to know how old these deposits are. We want to know what kind of environments they were in. We want to know something about the associations. Well, here is what's called a geological column. So geologists have worked for years and years and years studying those various layers at Hadar and have come up with this composite section, which is called a geological section, and it's technically called a formation, and it's called the Hadar Formation for obvious reasons. And down below, deposits are older and younger towards the top, obviously. And we have good argon dates. We've been able to get good argon dates. For example, here's the knee joint I found. It's down here near a volcanic ash called the SHT, which is dated at, can't quite see, it's a little hard to see there, at 3.4 million years ago. As we climb in the section, you come to a volcanic lava, which is a different kind of volcanic rock. That's dated at about 3.28 million years. And then as you move up, there's something called the TT4, just there, which is dated at 3.22. So you go from older to younger, to younger, to younger, to younger. And up towards the top, we have a date of 2.94 million years for this volcanic ash. And then there is a little squiggly line that you see just right there. And that is what's called a disconformity. There is a break in deposition or an erosion of sediments. So there's a loss of time. We don't know why, if it was due to erosion or whatever. But at the top, there is a date of 2.33 million years. Now, between 3.4 million years at the bottom here and about 3 million years at the top, we have what? 400,000 years of time. And during that entire span at Hadar, we have only Australopithecus afarensis fossils. It constitutes one species that lasted at Hadar for over 400,000 years. So it allows us to look at changes over time, which is terribly important also. And the general environment in which these creatures lived was around a lake, with rivers coming in, deltas, somewhat more forested along river edges, more woodland away from the lake. It wasn't a dense riverine forest. So this gives us an incredibly important framework in which to understand the ages and relationships between the knee joint and other important fossils that we'll talk about, particularly, of course, the skeleton known popularly as Lucy. Now, as we move on, we will look at some of these fossils in more detail and show you why Lucy's species, Australopithecus afarensis, is so distinct.